And we are going to be moving on in our Own Your Future presentation. You've been great already. There's been so many questions coming through. Keep that going. Our next presenter is just the same. I am excited to introduce that next speaker. She is going to be taking us on a wild ride through the current state of the world that we are doing business within. She is the principal at the prestigious Boston Consulting Group and a lead member of their retail and large-scale change practices team, where she helps her clients harness big data to better serve consumers. She's an on and off entrepreneur in the food and beverage industry and an active angel investor. She holds an MBA from MIT Sloan School of Management, and perhaps most importantly, she's a certified sommelier. Now let's put our virtual hands together as we welcome Victoria Gutierrez to Own Your Future. Victoria.
Hey folks, thanks for that introduction. Let me just get my slides up here because I'm useless without them. All right, let's get that into presenter mode. So Ben, you gave all of the important parts. I think the one that I will also add in addition to kind of what I do with BCG and where I've been to school and the fact that I'm a wine nut is I am a proud dog mom to Peaches, the Italian Greyhound. I got her at the beginning of quarantine, so that's been kind of a great outcome for me out of all of this. But what are we gonna do today? The first thing I wanna do is we're gonna take a little bit of a trip in the Wayback Machine and look at what consumer sentiment actually looked like as this crisis was beginning to unfold. We'll then dig into the numbers of what actually happened from a behavior perspective as well as a spending perspective. So not only how were people feeling, but what did they actually do? And then we'll talk about, what are the sticky trends, what's actually gonna stay, and what do we think is gonna happen based upon what we've seen over the last 12 to 14 weeks or so. So jumping right in, if we go back to the beginning of early March, we did a survey with roughly 3,500 Americans across all different types of demographics and asked them, what comes to mind when you think about the virus? Some things that are not super surprising: death, fear, quarantine, China, overblown, kind of all the things you would expect. People were starting to see risk in travel. Death was top of mind for almost 1 out of 5 Americans. Most people believe the worst was still ahead, and actually most people thought that there was going to be a recession associated with the crisis. That being said, consumers were kind of throwing off some contradictory signals. On the one hand, there was big fear of the virus and some macro level fears. They were starting to think about reducing spend so that they could actually save, sock away some money, spend less on luxury, fashion, some of those more discretionary purchases. But there was also a sense of business as usual through the crisis. So people were still aspiring to those things we're always gonna say, like, I'm gonna eat better, I'm gonna eat more vegetables, I'm gonna eat organic, I'm gonna quit smoking, and do all those types of things. Yet roughly 80% of people still had not kind of changed their plans for how they were going to deal with shopping over the next months or so. So the expectation early on was that the winners were gonna be savings, eating better, doing more preventative health things, kind of preparing, spending more on education, whereas the expected losers were things that you definitely didn't need to spend money on, like toys, gambling, luxury, and fashion. But then of course, we were all stuck in our homes, working or not working for roughly 3 months. And want to take a look now at how did consumer sentiment actually change? Did people get more optimistic or more pessimistic? And what did they do? Did they actually change behaviors? Did they actually change spend? So these numbers are going to come from BCG's Center for Consumer Insights launched surveys at the beginning of the crisis and has done them for 14 weeks straight. We've also brought in spend data either from credit card data or other sources where possible to kind of get a sense for things. And most of the graphs I'm going to show you are from kind of where things were as of June 19th, so fairly recently. I'll start with the obvious. We've changed our activity dramatically. Of course, we're doing a lot less of things that require leaving the house. We're doing a lot more of wearing a mask, washing hands, new habits like cooking, anything on Zoom that can contribute to more and more Zoom fatigue, be it for work or connecting with family. And then the things that kind of net out even, some people are exercising more, some people are exercising less. And delivery and takeout was kind of flat. Some people were doing less of it because they were cooking more, some were doing more because they couldn't go to restaurants. So no big surprises here. Now, what happened was, as all that was happening, everyone saw China have one big, kind of peak and then flatten things out. France, we saw one big peak and flatten things out. We're looking at confirmed new cases over time here. And then the US, we saw we were able to flatten the curve, but not actually go down in trajectory, and we're starting to see an uptick again. And consumers are kind of concerned about catching the virus, more or less in relation to the shape of that curve. But it varies by activity type. So by far, people are most concerned about catching the virus from travel and tourism. They're fairly concerned about local activities, less concerned around at-home activities. And an Airbnb, for example, they're feeling that is much safer than going to a hotel or taking a flight. And going to the local stores, for most consumers, they think that is safer than the Uber you may actually need to take to get to the store. Despite all those worries, people are still fairly buoyant in terms of their spend expectations. So these views are expectations of spending more or spending less in the coming months by month as the crisis has progressed. So on the left-hand side, you've got places where people have continued to think they're going to spend more. So they think they're going to spend more on restaurant pickup and delivery, that started to kind of level off. Still hoping to put away some savings, but then those things like spending more on fresh and organic foods, spending more on in-home entertainment, kind of, not super surprising. On the right-hand side, there are, negative spending expectations that are persisting for out-of-home entertainment in restaurants, despite the fact that, businesses were starting to open up in May and June. So people are still expecting to actually spend less than they used to in those areas. And we're seeing fairly persistent pessimism in terms of expectations for spend in clothing, perhaps for spending more on tops, and we've killed pants and are just wearing pajamas. And things like cosmetics are also down as well. I want to take us through a couple of industries that have actually seen really, really big impacts. I'm going to start with US grocery. We've all been impacted in this. I have because I work with grocery clients, but we all have because we're suddenly needing to change how we actually get food. So what we did here is take a look at online grocery. The green dots represent what consumers, what percentage of consumers expected to actually increase their spending in online grocery. The gray line is the real year-over-year change in web traffic, and then the blue line is real year-over-year change in actual spend. And what was interesting here is while people were saying they were expecting to increase their spend in online grocery, you can really see that the change in web traffic was a really great indicator of people actually moving to that channel from a shopping perspective. So while web traffic has always been a great kind of leading indicator of changes in habits and spend, as things are moving quite quickly and people are reacting real time to the news cycle, it's actually been a great way to identify what's about to come. And what's been interesting is, a lot of that was an initial panic buy. People said, oh man, I need to stock up. I don't want to go to the store. So you got a huge, rush to people buying from Instacart, from Amazon Fresh, all those different things. What's interesting is some of the behaviors have actually persisted. Those, increase in basket or trip size has actually stayed while the frequency has dropped. So people are, holding on to this new stocking up behavior and actually thinking ahead about their purchases and maybe lumping multiple trips over the week into one trip or order, as opposed to, an ad hoc, oh, I was going to make a dish tonight and I forgot this one ingredients, I'm going to go to the store. No one's really doing that anymore. And of course, all this increased grocery spend has come at the expense of restaurants. On the left-hand side, you can see large chains have fared a little bit better than medium-sized restaurant chains. But on the right-hand side, when you break it out by format, what we're really seeing is anyone who had a pre-existing either expectation as well as capability around takeout or delivery has fared better. So, your quick service and fast casual have done better than the dine-in restaurants. And of course, your third-party aggregators like Grubhub and Uber Eats have, seen dramatic increases in sales kind of throughout all of this. One more that we've seen a big change in is the travel industry. So across airlines, cruise lines, hotels, they're all down 80 to 90% from a sales perspective year over year. And unique customers are down. What's interesting is the customers who are still buying are buying roughly the same amount of times as they were before, But whereas cruise lines have really had to decrease, the cost of a cruise, air tickets are roughly the same price they have been, and hotels have actually increased room prices. So people are actually willing to pay the same or more for their flights and hotels versus last year, despite just a much lower frequency or individuals actually taking part in those things. Now, if we look at automotive travel, of course, everyone's, the kind of darlings of the VC world have been the rideshare companies, and that's something that's seen a meteoric rise over the last few years. And even, heading into this year, still seeing a big increase in rideshare sales. Now, once the crisis hit, dramatic drops in rideshare, as well as in car rentals, and a shift back toward not only purchasing, but maintenance of, personal cars. Now, this is one where people are expecting to spend less on automobiles. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to buy fewer automobiles. And this is going to be an interesting one to watch as we come out of this to see, are people going to go back to trusting sitting in a stranger's car or not? Last kind of deep dive on data I wanted to show you all is to look at non-food retail. And the big story here was anyone, similar to restaurants, if there was a pre-existing at-scale option for e-commerce, and if people were comfortable with buying the item online prior to the crisis, you've had less of an impact. So if you look at off-price retailers, none of them have an e-commerce solution to really speak of, so they're more or less shut down, 100% down year over year. Whereas shoes, athleisure, lingerie, those types of things, not as impacted. And then if we break out accessories, glasses are barely down year over year, because you could argue that's actually not a it's not a discretionary purchase. So very interesting kind of range of impact seen across non-food retail. All right, so I've showed you a bunch of numbers, but the whole point is, what do we do now? How do we win? How do we actually plan for what the new normal is going to be? So we're going to take a forward-looking view of some research that was done. This is based on a BCG survey we did in mid-May. So I will say this does have a little bit of a lag, and it doesn't account for the recent spike we're seeing in the States. So take some of this with a grain of salt, but should give a sense for how consumers were thinking about coming out of the crisis. So first, to start with kind of a simple framework, on the x-axis here, you've got the long-term growth outlook prior to the outbreak for a number of different categories. On the y-axis, you can see what the short-term COVID impact has been. So in the top right, in the green boxes, categories that were growing fast, and they've accelerated that growth as a result of COVID. Amazon, online grocery, obviously, but then we're seeing some of those aspirational things. People are spending on OTC healthcare, organic and fresh foods, personal care. There's still a push towards all of this, and it's been accelerated. The loser, so to speak, we've talked about today, it's ride sharing, it's restaurants, it's anything out of the house. Kind of unexpected winner, and some of this has been retail electronics, where they were on a slow decline. They were expected to continue that decline, but now as we've needed to, kind of shore up our home office resources as well as buy electronics to keep ourselves entertained at home, it's actually seen quite an unexpected boost. And when you look across ages as well as income quartiles, overwhelmingly, people miss travel the most. That's what they miss the most. They miss getting out of the house, eating out of the house, some cosmetics. Kind of your older folks in higher incomes miss business travel quite a lot. Gambling ranks in the top 5. I guess people really want to get back to Vegas, but overwhelmingly it's leisure travel. And what's fascinating is that while 60 to 70% of people say they can't wait to start traveling again, less than 40% actually see themselves taking a vacation this year. So kind of their hopes and their excitement don't actually meet up with the actions they expect to take. And these kind of communicated sentiments actually tie with what we're starting to see around the globe. So on the left-hand side, you can see, again, that chart of China and France, how they've more or less gotten to a very low new case count. But, despite that, consumers are still saying overwhelmingly that their daily lifestyle is massively disrupted versus, pre-crisis. So France is only down to 70% from a 79% disruption at the peak. China only down to 62 versus 66. So people are not actually getting back to activity despite kind of having the right environment to do so. And they're actually still expecting to kind of pull back. So there's that expectation either of a second spike or of an extended recession. So people are still kind of, thinking they can't quite go back to normal yet. TBD on whether this happens in the States, but I think it's fair to say that we should all be expecting that the return to normal is going to be slower than originally thought. That being said, when surveyed, most American consumers want to return to normal in terms of levels for different activities that they're currently doing different amounts for. So they're doing less of shopping in stores today, and 66% of those people want to go back to their normal amount of doing that. Most people want to get to normal on in-home entertainment or cooking. They don't actually want to keep these new habits. This is truly temporary for most people. That being said, people who do want to keep their new habits are younger. So your Gen Z and millennial consumers are the ones who are saying, I've developed a new habit and I want to keep my new habit. So we're showing data here for an in-home entertainment activity. So you can see that 24% of younger consumers actually say they've developed a new in-home entertainment activity habit, and 22% of them want to actually maintain this new level. So they don't actually want to go back to normal. And this is fascinating because as that group of consumers kind of rises up in terms of amount of spend and amount of the total economy, we right now have an opportunity to shape their habits and actually create loyal, sticky customers who we're training to do different things right now because they're open to it. Now, if I take that and we look at the top 10 online categories, green dots are Gen Z and millennials we were just talking about. Blue dots are Gen X and baby boomers, and then all surveys response are the triangles here. In the first graph, you can see the percent of all consumers who made online purchases during the outbreak in these different categories. And on the right-hand side, it's first time ever. So you can see, not only are these people changing their habits and their frequency and buying in these categories, and the millennials may actually want to keep that new habit, but a lot of them are first-time buyers too. So there's huge potential here in this particular portion of consumers because they are actually taking on new habits that are going to stick. So if I sum it all up, we have two normals, right? We have the temporary normal, which we're all living in right now. Leisure travel and out-of-home entertainment are basically done. We're wearing masks, and some of us are actually exercising a bit more. If we think about those things, those are likely to revert more to the old normal. It will take more time than we expect, particularly for leisure travel and out-of-home entertainment, but we're going to stop wearing masks. We're going to say this is a new workout regimen, but it's going to be just like any New Year's resolution. We're going to go back to normal on it. Now, the things that are going to be part of the new normal, it's going to stick. Some of the things we're doing less of, we're probably going to keep doing less of. Work travel is one, and I think this is going to come from both employers and employees. We're just going to stop traveling. I used to spend 50 weeks out of the year on the road, 4 days a week. I have not traveled in 5 months, and I can still do my job. I think a lot of different industries are starting to realize this. So it will be unlikely that we get to a totally normal level on work travel. Similar with eating at restaurants and shopping in stores, these could be potentially dampened if people, continue to think it's a less safe alternative, or it's just so much easier to buy things online. That being said, there is going to be an opportunity to actually grow overall demand here. We're just going to need to kind of change the offer. Some of the things we're doing more of that, will likely stick: washing hands and cooking. These are good habits. Those are things that people are probably going to keep doing. Working from home, probably not as much as we're doing right now, but that's going to stick as well. And kind of all of the things that come along with that, like having home office setups, having reliable internet, being on Zoom, all of those types of things. And then there's a whole host of things that were pre-crisis trends that actually have accelerated during this, and there's an opportunity to capitalize on that growth. So online shopping, obviously, everything's moving online. Video chat, having virtual classes for fun, learning different things online, social media in general, delivery and takeout. Those are the types of things that there's actually a big opportunity because we've seen the capacity for people to switch to these things. and we can capitalize it with kind of longer term to create the right solutions and the right offers for people. 6 takeaways for you all from tons and tons of numbers I want to leave you with. One is it's right to be thinking about and planning for post-crisis behaviors. It's the right thing to do, but we need to expect there's going to be a bigger lag, to get to new normal than we expected. We're going to be in temporary normal, likely longer than we want or expect. A lot of the changes, particularly the huge declines we've seen in certain categories, are more likely to be temporary. Travel's going to come back. It's down 90%. It'll be back. We want it to be back. It just might take longer. Third, now more than ever, watch web traffic as a leading indicator of change. It's always been a great way to kind of anticipate shifts in consumer sentiment and consumer demand. But right now, as things move quickly, keep doing it if you're in an industry where that actually can help. We talked about this a fair bit, but change is sticky with younger consumers, and they're signaling that they're making new habits now that they want to stick. So you have a chance right now to actually create loyalty with these folks as they're kind of rising up in terms of socioeconomic status. Pre-crisis growth in health and wellness, the aspirational things to eat healthier, be healthier, it was growing pre-crisis, it accelerated in the crisis. There's a huge opportunity here because people are spending time with themselves and wanting to invest in themselves and their well-being. And then lastly, if I were to sum up where the likely winners are going to be kind of heading out of the crisis, me around, to the extent that you can enable working from home in the many different ways that you can do that to make it easier, to make it more convenient, to make the home setting work better for this. Distance learning of new skills, be it, cooking. I just invested in, classes to try and make my sourdough bread suck a little bit less. A lot of people are, learning a whole bunch of new things, music classes, all of that. So being able to teach people online, it's going to be huge. Anything for social interaction. We've got, grandparents learning how to use Zoom for the first time. That's exciting. So what else can we do to actually enable social interaction and keep, all of these new interactions that aren't in person going? And then last mile delivery, as more and more gets to kind of moving online, as we, we're buying everything online, how can we actually enable that in a way that is scalable and makes sense? There's going to be some winners and some losers there. Thank you all for listening. It was a lot of data. This is my email address. Feel free to shoot me a note if you have a specific question. I know there's a whole bunch of folks from a lot of different industries. And I'm happy to kind of, jump in where I can, because this was a pretty high level overview of kind of what BCG's seen over the course of the last 14 weeks.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. My God, the amount of information there is mind blowing. Hold on, I'm just going to turn off your screen share there so we can appreciate each other in this new virtual world that we are living in. So again, thank you. We have a few cool questions come in. One that I'm really intrigued by is if you have any insight on if people during this time have kind of become more trusting of tech, or if it's all just been a function of necessity and it'll kind of disappear after that.
That's an interesting one, and I don't have a fact-based or data-informed answer.
Of course, there's not a lot of data to that, I don't think. But just based off of your insights, what's your gut telling you?
Based on the insights, people are being forced to do things that they probably should have been doing all along, or that, it requires breaking bad habits, and this has been a clean break. It's kind of gone cold turkey for some people. So to the extent that we've all had to move to video conferencing and Slack and all of that, and nothing catastrophic has happened, I have to expect that that's created a lot of trust and goodwill in tech in general.
Yeah, for sure. It is interesting. One thing that, and this is kind of a question for myself, and I'll get to a couple others, but one thing I've noticed between just personal data, myself and my friends, is we're all kind of saving a lot of money right now, because I'm not going to restaurants and I'm not spending money on a glass of wine or something like that. Do you guys see there's going to be like this huge boom at some point when people's they're kind of accumulating all this wealth and all of a sudden they're going to not know what to do with it?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because it requires peering into the crystal ball a little bit and saying, are we going to have a massive impact on the economy or not? If not, maybe this enables people to be first-time home buyers. Maybe it means paying down a bunch of debt. There's a whole, host of different ways people could actually, change their spending habits and, their total, kind of economic health with that. Whereas if, we have a second, third spike, if we go back into massive layoffs, if, there's an extended recession, then people are going to need, all those extra savings to actually get us through all of this.
Yeah, for sure. This one, I think it's just kind of a recap here. Someone was asking, what were some of those key indicators you mentioned on how the market's doing? Can you expand a little bit on that?
Consumer sentiment is one thing, but we all know that we don't always do what we say we're going to do. The best kind of indicator, at least through this and historically when there have been big shifts, is to just watch web traffic. Simple things like watch search traffic for particular words, look at web traffic for a group of websites that are in a particular industry. Increases usually predict future activity. So that's kind of been the big kind of unlock for us as we watched. People said they were going to buy more online. People started researching more online, and then you saw the money actually come.
Got it. So it's kind of like this staged out process.
Yeah.
Makes sense. It's funny. There's a question here from someone who I'm assuming owns a website or a business in the home and garden niche, and they're kind of wondering, what do you think the outlook is in that industry? I mean, I guess as people are staying home, are they investing more in how beautiful their backyard is?
Yeah, so I've had a few conversations with folks in the real estate industry, as well as I've had some DIY retailer clients in the past, and talking to them, they're seeing huge booms. People all of a sudden are realizing not only that they're spending more time at home, but they may be spending more time at home more long-term, and they need to make it a place that is more multifunctional than it used to be. Needing to make sure that you actually create an office space, making a beautiful garden to walk around in when you're on the phone, those types of things. People are reinvesting a lot in their homes, both in the real estate itself as well as kind of the look and feel of their homes, because all of a sudden we're spending way more time than we used to in them.
Right, for sure. We only have a minute or two here left, so I'll thank you first before I kick you off the internet. But I thought this was a good question to end it with from Sanjeev. It's a great one. He says, if you were to enter one business space after viewing all this data, what would that be? We'll pretend money is limitless and the world's your oyster.
Money's limitless. I am buying a massive fleet of electric powered trucks, and I'm just making deliveries.
I like it. You can combining several industries there. Probably why Tesla's stock has been going through the roof.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you again, Victoria. I love seeing that much data. I'm going to flip through your deck again myself, just so I can take it all in, because it's so much. So thank you for being here. And I'll say goodbye for now. We'll get excited for the next one. Cheers.